Welcome back to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. So let's get a roundup now from the world of arts and culture, and who better to discuss them than historian and broadcaster David Oldroyd-Bolt. Welcome to the show, David. OK, David, so tell us what's been going on.
Well, very briefly, last week was Sir Antonio Pappano's first week as chief conductor of the London Symphony Orchestra, where he's come from the Royal Opera House, Covent Garden. I was lucky enough to go last Sunday to hear him conduct. He had as his soloist the extremely celebrated Chinese pianist Yuja Wang, who I must say I didn't quite get the fuss about. It's very apparent that already the LSO and Sir Antonio have forged a great rapport. He brings all of the verve and precision of an opera conductor of 20 years at Covent Garden, before that many years elsewhere, to the orchestral repertoire, and I predict off the basis of that one concert, plus listening to reviews of the others, that this is going to be a seriously good thing for London. Oh,
well, that's great news. And then you have another story.
Yeah, well, I've just come back from the Cliveden Literary Festival, which was established by the historian Lord Roberts, Andrew Roberts, and Natalie Livingston, who is also an historian and whose husband owns Cliveden House in Buckinghamshire, famous for its involvement with the Profumo scandal in 1963. Which was, I say this every year about Cliveden, it is the finest literary festival in this country, and the lineup this year was astonishing. We began yesterday morning with a discussion between the historian Sir Neil MacGregor and the former head of the Secret Intelligence Service, Sir Alex Younger, about what Sir Alex thinks of the current situation in security around the world and the future of it. Somewhat sobering, but absolutely fascinating discussion. Today, the Hollywood actress Rachel Weisz was in conversation with Emily Maitlis, which, you know, to get an actress of Rachel Weisz's standard to a literary festival was extraordinary. It was particularly nice to see her and Daniel Craig at the dinner last night. But I think
Crikey, you're rubbing shoulders with the...
Well, no, they were 20 feet away.
Oh, right, OK, fine.
Don't worry, they were safe. I think the standout, though, that everybody would agree on was yesterday's discussion between the novelists Sir Salman Rushdie and Ian McEwan, particularly Rushdie talking about the attack in August 2022, where he was stabbed 15 times while on stage at an event in New York by, well, and we must say his alleged attacker, because he still hasn't been convicted or indeed gone to trial, was a Lebanese-American who apparently had read 2 pages of Rushdie's famous book, The Satanic Verses, but was motivated by the fatwa against the Satanic Verses and against Rushdie, which was imposed in 1989 by the Ayatollah Khomeini of Iran, with a $3 million reward.
And I dare say that the Ayatollah hadn't read the Satanic Verses either.
I'm not sure he would have done. And this was famous at the time because Rushdie had to go into hiding for many, many years. The Japanese translator of the book was stabbed to death. The Italian translator was stabbed and grievously injured, as was the Norwegian, I believe. Anyway, Rushdie, over recent years, has not had security at events. He felt able to live a normal life, and he said while discussing this book that, in fact, when he was being stabbed and laying on the floor while the attacker was held down by members of the audience, he thought, but this is an anachronism, why now? Why are you doing this now? But throughout the novel, throughout the memoir, sorry, and throughout the discussion yesterday, despite what has happened to him, despite, you know, he's, I suppose, rather, you could say, would be rather reasonable for him to think that people saying he should be killed should be suppressed. He was virulent in his defence of free speech, absolutely without any conscience whatsoever. Yes. He just said, no, there must be free speech. And even if it leads to people being in danger, even if the ideas themselves are inflammatory, they must be heard. There must be argument about them.
I mean, this is fascinating. I read his previous memoir, Joseph Anton, which, of course, details his experience of going into hiding, having the security service all the time. Terrible experience for anyone to go through. But not just that, but the endless debates on TV about whether he brought it on himself.
Well, including people like
a book.
John le Carré, for instance, had said at the time, well, you know, he should have been more responsible. He should have thought about the consequences. And perhaps you can make the argument that he should have thought about the consequences, but the argument that he should not have published it, I think, coming from any author, is bizarre.
Absolutely.
And I think it was rather heartwarming. The audience was clearly very moved by the discussion. McEwan and Rushdie have known each other a great many years, so it was a really amusing discussion between 2 old friends.
Yes.
But as your viewers may know, Rushdie lost his right eye, so he now wears a pair of spectacles with a blacked-out lens. He lost the use of his left hand. He was severely injured, you know, 15 stabbings, including to the torso, to the liver, and so on. So it was a moving thing, but it was also galvanising.
And does he give a sense of what he writes in this new book, Knife, it's called?
Yes.
I mean, is he at that point now where he thinks that, you know, free speech has been lost? Because I don't think the Satanic Verses or something akin to the Satanic Verses could be published today.
He basically made that point. He said, you know, while the book was being published, bear in mind that it was published in 88, the fatwa imposed in 89, and throughout the world the translations are going on. He and his publisher had to fight and fight and fight to get that to happen, to get there to be translations, and for it to remain in print. And he basically makes the point it just wouldn't happen now because there isn't the appetite for it.
And it's very interesting to hear him being such a vehement defender of free speech when, as you say, there have been some vociferous critics against him.
Yes.
And saying that he ought to shut up, he's responsible for everything that happened, all of the rest of it.
Yep.
But even when the stakes are that high, he recognises, well, not just in terms of politics, but also in terms of arts. Free speech is at the core, surely.
Well, again, this is a point that both McEwan and Rushdie made, that without the freedom to express ideas and to debate them and to be controversial, to be perhaps inflammatory, you have no artistic freedom. You have no freedom of conscience. And the freedom to express those views, and it is perfectly reasonable, I think we both agree, that if someone says something which is straightforwardly inciting, say, violence, then they should be censored for it. Censured, I mean, not censored.
Yes.
You know, they should be held to account for it. But there should still, in my view, be that freedom to make that point, and you take the consequences, whether social consequences of ostracisation or the legal consequences of prosecution if, for instance, something you say leads to someone being murdered.
Yes. But when it comes to literature, I mean, we have to have the assumption of complete freedom.
Yes.
For any kind of experimentation, any kind of risk-taking. What do you think this has done to the world of literature more generally, to have this kind of awful, ominous example that has been set by the treatment of Rushdie?
Well, I think we both agree that it's stifled the publishing industry, and that the publishing industry has stifled itself on so many subjects. And if you think of the history of freedom of publishing in this country, really it goes from the Lady Chatterley trial in 1963 through to probably that time of the fatwa issued against Satanic Verses, maybe through the 90s. There were some controversial novels, you know, Bret Easton Ellis, Michel Houellebecq, the French novelist, whose work's been translated. But I think most publishers now simply lack the spine. They lack the backbone to stand up for controversial ideas and the right for them to be expressed, and for the right of authors to push the boundaries.
Well, there seems to be a double thing, doesn't there? Because, you know, there were bookshops that were burnt, firebombed at the time of the Satanic Verses fatwa. So there's that pressure for repercussions from lunatics, frankly. But you've also got people within publishing saying, no, we have a responsibility to send out the right moral message. You have the implementation of sensitivity readers and that kind of thing.
Yes, and warnings on books, history of fiction books published years ago, warnings that these do not reflect the attitudes of the time. Well, of course they don't. That's one of the reasons we read books written in a different age or context from our own, is to be exposed to those differences.
Yes.
But there seems to be this pusillanimity now that people can't possibly comprehend something that is without their very small limits, and that if they were exposed to it, they'll somehow disintegrate. Well, good. Those people deserve to be, as it were, intellectually disintegrated if they're so weak and feeble as to be unable to deal with something that is challenging. And I don't know about you, but I find books that challenge nothing utterly boring.
I totally agree.
It's the equivalent of a glass of water. It may be in some way nourishing, but it has no flavour. It has no challenge.
I particularly like the university that put a warning on Julius Caesar, 2 students of English literature saying it contained a murder. You know, I think if you don't know that already, you probably shouldn't be studying it.
Well, and the same has happened at the Globe and at the Royal Court and at Stratford, that, you know, Shakespeare, Coriolanus, for instance. Although they don't seem to give the very worst ones, which we discussed before, the graphic warnings they deserve.
Well, Titus Andronicus.
Yes, exactly.
You know, that's fine. You can cut up 2 kids and serve them to their mother in a pie, and that's OK, apparently. Well, look, David Oldroyd-Bolt, it's always a pleasure to have you. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.